It was supposed to be just another late-night interview, warm lights, rehearsed jokes, predictable applause, but when Keanu Reeves walked in silently, a silver crucifix hanging from his neck and a weight behind his eyes, something shifted. Minutes later, Jimmy Fallon could no longer smile, and the show came to a halt. What Keanu said live was never part of the script and will never be forgotten. Oh, and before we continue, tell us where you're watching this video from. We love hearing from you and always read the comments, ****. The music pulsed through the NBC studio as if it carried the collective anticipation of everyone present. The red live sign glowed above the stage like a beacon calling for spectacle, its steady hum promising an evening filled with laughter and entertainment. The band played loud and joyful, their brass blaring triumphantly while the bass line thumped with intent, a drumbeat that seemed almost prophetic given what would unfold. As the audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering with unbridled enthusiasm, there was a palpable sense of excitement in the air. This wasn't merely another episode of The Tonight Show. Tonight promised something extraordinary. When Jimmy Fallon appeared at center stage, arms wide open as though he'd just won an award, his energy was infectious. "Let's go, people," he shouted over the crescendo of sound, grinning ear to ear. "Tonight is special. We've got a legend with us, one of the most beloved actors on the planet, a guy who needs no introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Keanu Reeves." At the mention of his name, the crowd erupted into screams, applause, and whistles. For a fleeting moment, every single person forgot about themselves, their worries, responsibilities, or even where they were seated, and became united by sheer admiration for the man walking onto the stage. From the wings emerged Keanu, calm and composed, each step slow and deliberate, as if time itself had slowed down to honor his presence. He wore a black suit without a tie, the sleeves slightly wrinkled at the elbows, lending him an understated elegance. Beneath the open collar of his shirt hung a silver crucifix, catching the light of the studio lamps and gleaming softly against his chest. Unlike other guests who entered with bursts of energy or flashy gestures designed to captivate immediately, Keanu simply raised a gentle hand, offering a faint smile that seemed tinged with sadness. His eyes held depths untold, like midnight skies after a long walk alone. As Jimmy welcomed him with a quick hug, then gestured toward the chairs, the atmosphere subtly began to shift. Though neither host nor guest acknowledged it outwardly, those watching keenly might have noticed how the room's frequency altered ever so slightly. Jimmy leaned back comfortably once they sat down, ready to steer the conversation with his usual charm. "Keanu, man," he started enthusiastically, aiming to set a familiar tone, "what an absolute honor to have you back." Then, flashing his trademark grin, he added playfully, "You're looking better than ever, is that Botox or just good lighting?" A ripple of chuckles spread across the audience, but Keanu didn't respond right away. Instead, he paused thoughtfully before replying, his voice low and measured. "Maybe, just time." This response caught Jimmy off guard momentarily, forcing him to recalibrate. Determined not to lose momentum, he chuckled again, attempting levity. "In this suit, huh? Kind of like John Wick in Recovery, all you're missing is the dog." More laughter ensued, yet Keanu's reaction remained subdued. Crossing one leg over the other, he rested his hands on his knee, fingers brushing lightly against the crucifix swaying beneath the warm studio lights. Sometimes, he murmured quietly, almost introspectively, "we put down the weapons, but the weight stays." An unexpected hush fell over the room. For a brief second, the audience froze, unsure how to process such raw honesty during what was supposed to be lighthearted banter. Sensing the tension, Jimmy chuckled nervously, trying to deflect. "Wow, we're getting philosophical tonight, and no dog." But Keanu turned to face him fully now, his gaze unwavering and anchored, the kind that sees beyond facades and pretenses. "Absence isn't always a loss," he seemed to communicate silently. "Sometimes, it's an invitation." Jimmy smiled uncertainly, sensing that something fundamental had changed within the space they occupied. Subtle, yes, but undeniably real. Like the frequency of the show had shifted imperceptibly, despite the cameras continuing to roll. "You know," Jimmy ventured cautiously, leaning forward slightly, "there's something different about you tonight. Are you okay?" Keanu lifted his eyes briefly, then glanced down at the crucifix resting against his chest. The camera zoomed in, capturing the small dance of brightness as the silver caught the light once more. "Maybe tonight," he said softly, almost reverently, "is the night when silence needs to speak." With those words, the entire studio fell still. No movement, no rustling, nothing but the quiet hum of electricity coursing through wires overhead. Jimmy, usually the master of momentum, found himself adrift. His eyes darted toward the control room instinctively, seeking guidance, but no cues came. It was as though something sacred had taken root in that space, rendering conventional scripts irrelevant. "Wow," he whispered finally, attempting to regain some semblance of control. That was poetic. But Keanu held his gaze for a beat longer, smiling faintly, as if to say, "It's not poetry, it's confession." A tremor ran through Jimmy's hands, causing the cards he held to quiver slightly. The laughter that typically buoyed these moments had evaporated entirely. Desperate to lighten the mood, he gestured vaguely toward Keanu's crucifix. "That thing," he said, aiming for levity, "does it mean something?" Keanu hesitated, holding the silver pendant gently between his fingers. Several seconds ticked by as the camera framed the detail, the metal worn smooth from years of touch, old but solid, bearing the marks of countless stories untold. Finally, he replied, "It does." Nothing more. Just those two simple words. Jimmy waited, expecting elaboration, but none came. Instead, Keanu added cryptically, "Something personal. Everything that's true is personal." Another weighted pause followed. But not everything personal has to be spoken. Silence descended once again, not awkward, exactly, but heavy, present, the kind that leans into your bones and forces you to sit with yourself. Jimmy swallowed hard, forcing a smile that barely reached his eyes. Tension lined his face as he pressed further. "You really seem different tonight. Are you sure everything's okay, Keanu?" Keanu folded his hands on the table between them, the crucifix catching the light again, its shimmer feeling ceremonial, almost holy. "Tonight might be the night when silence needs to speak," he repeated softly, as if reminding both himself and the world around him. And indeed, the music did not return, nor did the crowd cheer. The studio, which only moments ago had thrummed with laughter and applause, had transformed into something else entirely, a vessel for truth, however uncomfortable it may feel. Years earlier, in Chicago, the sky had been gray and heavy, reminiscent of scenes pulled straight from an old noir film. Cold winds sliced through alleyways, coiling menacingly between towering glass buildings and rusted fire escapes. Keanu stepped out of a black SUV, hood pulled up tightly, scarf wrapped snugly around his neck. The air smelled of impending rain mixed with iron, a metallic tang that hinted at storms brewing both outside and within. He was filming a small independent project, one of those quiet films he took on when he needed to disappear for a while. No blockbuster scale, no press tours, just him, a camera, and long days spent waiting in corners few would remember. The studio they used was tucked into a former warehouse, barely renovated. Pipes rattled intermittently, walls echoed footsteps, and coffee cups sat perpetually half-filled. Someone was always sighing into a headset somewhere nearby. That's where Keanu first noticed Elijah. Pushing a mop across the concrete floor of Stage C, Elijah moved methodically, quietly. Older, perhaps in his 60s, with a neatly trimmed beard and uniform showing signs of wear, he didn't look up much. Yet, he noticed everything. Most of the crew overlooked him entirely, but Elijah saw them, and he saw Keanu. It was a Tuesday when they first spoke. Keanu had been standing alone between takes, staring intently at a mark on the wall where paint had peeled away. Elijah approached with a rag in hand, gently wiping a smudge off a nearby railing. Without looking directly at Keanu, he remarked, "You're not really waiting on lighting." Surprised, Keanu turned to him. "No," Elijah continued matter-of-factly, "you're listening to something inside." Intrigued, Keanu offered a faint smile. "You always this poetic with actors?" Elijah shrugged nonchalantly. "Only the ones who look like they've been walking for a long time." With that enigmatic statement, he walked away, leaving Keanu pondering the encounter. That night, Keanu stayed later than usual. Most of the crew had already left, and many of the lights had been turned off. Seated on a stool near the back door, he reviewed lines under dim illumination when Elijah reappeared. Wordlessly, Elijah handed him a paper cup of coffee, then settled beside him. They sat in companionable silence until eventually, Elijah spoke. "The truest kind of faith doesn't shout. Doesn't beg to be heard." Curious, Keanu asked, "What does it do, then?" Elijah looked ahead, not meeting Keanu's gaze. "It listens." Keanu studied the older man's profile in the dim light. There was no performance in Elijah, only presence, an unshakable stillness that intrigued Keanu deeply. Softly, he inquired, "Are you religious?" Elijah sipped his coffee thoughtfully before responding. "Labels are for shelves. I just believe the world's been deaf for a long time. Maybe it's time someone listened back. Over the following days, similar quiet conversations unfolded, always at the edges of the workday when no one else paid attention. These interactions grew increasingly meaningful to Keanu, becoming highlights he anticipated more than the actual filming itself. One morning, Elijah showed him a small notebook. Its cover was worn leather, held closed with a thin cord. Inside lay pages brimming with handwritten thoughts, reflections, quotes, sketches, some resembling prayers, others feeling like poems. None bore signatures or claimed authority. "What is this?" Keanu asked, running his fingers lightly over the textured surface. Elijah responded simply, "Just things I've written over the years. Notes to no one, or maybe to someone I haven't met yet." Handing it to Keanu without ceremony, Elijah explained, no strings attached. Confused yet touched, Keanu questioned why he'd chosen him. Elijah looked directly at him for the first time, his gaze piercing yet compassionate. "Because you walked like someone who's been listening to silence for too long." On Elijah's last day at the studio, he vanished without saying goodbye. However, in Keanu's trailer, the notebook awaited discovery. Inside the front cover lay a small handwritten dedication. "When you meet someone who carries the same emptiness, give them this." Keanu read that line dozens of times, though its full meaning eluded him. Carrying the notebook with him wherever he went, he resolved to safeguard its secrets until the moment felt right. Back in the present, the studio lights of Jimmy Fallon's set cast colder shadows now. Laughter had drained from the air, replaced by an electric stillness. The audience remained seated, transitioning from mere spectators to witnesses of something profound. Slowly, deliberately, Keanu reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. His hand emerged clutching a leather-bound notebook, which he placed gently on the table between them. Jimmy blinked, uncertainty flickering across his features. Keanu traced his finger across the cover exactly as Elijah once had, his touch imbued with reverence. "This has waited a long time," he murmured, his voice soft yet resonant. The camera captured every detail meticulously, the texture of the leather, the shine of Keanu's crucifix, the utter stillness enveloping the room. Leaning in slightly, Jimmy ventured cautiously, "What is that?" "It was given to me by someone who understood things I hadn't yet faced," Keanu replied, his tone reflective. "Like what?" Jimmy prodded gently. Keanu met his gaze, not with judgment or pity, but with recognition that transcended words. "Like how faith is not found in noise," he articulated slowly, but in the quiet moments we're most afraid to hear. Pushing the notebook forward just a few inches, Keanu added, "Maybe tonight, it finds its real owner." The leather-bound object sat between them like a relic, breathing, pulsing, watching. Jimmy stared at it as if it possessed life, unable to look away. Keanu didn't push or prod further, instead, he simply waited, understanding implicitly that the notebook didn't require force to reveal its contents, only readiness. In the control room, producers exchanged uneasy glances but ultimately decided to let events unfold naturally. No cut to commercial breaks disrupted the flow, instead, something extraordinary was happening. Everyone could feel it, a subtle yet undeniable shift rippling through the room. Finally, Keanu opened the cover, turning the first few pages slowly. The aged paper whispered audibly with each turn, revealing reflections written in a strong, clean hand. Some entries spanned mere sentences, others stretched across half a page. Selecting one passage, Keanu began reading aloud. "The soul never screams. It knocks. And if you're too busy laughing, you won't hear it." Jimmy blinked rapidly, visibly unsettled. Attempting to mask his discomfort, he laughed weakly, but the sound landed hollow. "That's poetic," he managed, though his voice betrayed lingering uncertainty. Unfazed, Keanu continued flipping pages, selecting another paragraph. Running his finger down the text, he read softly. "Noise is not music. Speech is not truth. Faith is not volume." The camera lingered on Jimmy's face, capturing the subtle changes etched there. His initial grin faded, replaced by contemplation. Leaning back slightly, as if trying to create distance, he nonetheless remained tethered somehow. Encouraged, Keanu pressed onward, his voice softer now. "The world's full of people laughing because they're terrified of their own echo." Jimmy exhaled sharply, nearly laughing again but stopping himself. The air felt thinner somehow. Once more, the crucifix on Keanu's chest caught the light, its shimmer a quiet declaration of something deeper. Clearing his throat, Jimmy admitted, "That one hits kind of hard." Meeting his gaze steadily, Keanu probed gently, "Why?" Shrugging uncomfortably, Jimmy fidgeted with a pen in his hands. I don't know. Maybe because I spend my life making people laugh. You know, it's what I do. Pausing, he reflected aloud, sometimes, we laugh to keep from listening. Sitting utterly still, Keanu closed the notebook gently. The man who gave this to me didn't believe in religion, he shared thoughtfully. He believed in stillness. In listening. In something bigger than us, not because someone told him to, but because he had met it in silence. Jimmy's voice lowered, tentative yet curious. You're talking about Elijah? Keanu nodded affirmatively. His crucifix shifted slightly as he leaned forward earnestly. Fixating on it anew, Jimmy ventured hesitantly, Can I ask you something? That crucifix, you always wear it. After a brief pause, Keanu clarified, Since the day he gave it to me. Furrowing his brow, Jimmy queried further, Elijah gave you that? Shaking his head, Keanu corrected, No. Someone else. Someone I met later. Someone who helped me see that faith isn't about the answers, it's about staying with the question. Touching the crucifix gently, Keanu elaborated poignantly, It reminded me that some people carry a cross you can't see. And some carry one they don't even realize they have. His stillness unsettled Jimmy profoundly. After a prolonged pause, the host gathered his courage and posed another query, his voice sincere and yearning. Keanu, can I ask you something honest? Always, Keanu assured him warmly, inviting vulnerability. Hesitating briefly, Jimmy locked eyes with him, searching for reassurance. Why do you believe in all this? It wasn't sarcasm coloring his tone now, it was genuine curiosity, an ache to understand. Allowing the silence to linger momentarily, Keanu answered softly but firmly. Because I once walked beside someone who carried an invisible cross every day. I didn't see it then. I didn't comprehend the weight they bore. And when they were gone, I felt it, all of it, as if it had been passed to me. Swallowing thickly, Jimmy ventured tentatively, Who was it? Keanu chose not to respond verbally this time. Instead, he reached for the notebook again, opening it to a page marked with a folded corner. Sliding it toward Jimmy wordlessly, he invited him to read. Faith isn't in the words we say when life is good. It's in the weight we carry when the world is quiet. When there's no audience, no laughter, just us. And the silence that knows who we really are. Jimmy stared at the page for an extended period, acutely aware of his own breathing filling the void. Looking up eventually, he asked hoarsely, Did Elijah write that? Keanu confirmed with a nod. Closing the notebook gently, Jimmy confessed haltingly, I believe, he struggled to articulate his thoughts coherently. I believe, Keanu interjected slowly, guiding the conversation, that faith is not a place we arrive. It's a road we walk. And sometimes, we don't even know we're on it until something, or someone, shows us the dust on our shoes. Tears glistened faintly in Jimmy's eyes, though he fought valiantly to blink them away. Unsure what to say next, he simply sat there, grappling with emotions bubbling to the surface. Leaning back slightly, Keanu offered solace. You don't have to believe it, not now, maybe not ever. Then why say it? Jimmy challenged, confusion evident in his tone. Keanu's gaze softened perceptibly. Because sometimes, the silence needs someone to speak for it. Staring down at the notebook once more, unmoving, Jimmy's fingers brushed the cover lightly. On Keanu's chest, the crucifix gleamed steadfastly, unchanged and unyielding despite the shifting dynamics around them. Studio lights dimmed slightly, though no technical adjustments accounted for the change. The atmosphere grew heavier, more intimate, wrapping itself around everyone present like a cocoon spun from threads of shared humanity. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his chair, visibly affected yet uncertain why. Between them sat the leather-bound notebook, a bridge constructed from silence, connecting disparate worlds. Running his thumb along its edge pensively, Keanu murmured quietly, There's more. Perking up slightly, Jimmy inquired, More pages? Nodding affirmatively, Keanu elaborated, More than that, letters. Opening to the back section of the notebook, he revealed several folded sheets of paper tucked carefully between pages. Yellowed with age yet lovingly preserved, they bore testament to untold stories patiently awaiting their turn to be told. Holding them up for Jimmy to inspect, Keanu explained solemnly, Elijah wrote letters to people he never gave them to. He said, Some truths are too heavy for the moment they arrive. Leaning in closer, Jimmy queried curiously, You've read them? Shaking his head, Keanu corrected, Not all. I promised him I'd only read them when the silence asked for it. Sifting through the stack thoughtfully, he noted labels consisting solely of first names or dates. One particular letter featured nothing but a faint sketch of a boy with large, expressive eyes and messy hair. Selecting that one deliberately, Keanu unfolded it slowly, delicately, the aged paper crackling audibly in the otherwise silent room. Taking a deep breath, he began reading aloud. To the one who always turned pain into punchlines. I saw you once, standing in front of a crowd. They laughed so easily, but your eyes didn't join in. You made them forget the wait, but I could see yours. I saw the boy who sat outside the hospital room, too afraid to go in. I saw the son who made jokes in the hallway so the nurses wouldn't see him cry. You lost someone, didn't you? And you carried that silence like a shadow ever since. Pausing significantly, Keanu allowed the weight of those words to settle fully. Even the camera crew had ceased moving entirely, transfixed by the unfolding scene. Jimmy's expression initially remained inscrutable, but soon his hand gripped the edge of his chair tightly, knuckles whitening noticeably. His breathing pattern shifted audibly, betraying suppressed emotion. Continuing resolutely, Keanu pressed onward. They told you it wasn't your fault, but your heart didn't believe them. Because you think, if you had made her laugh one more time, she might have stayed a little longer. Lowering his gaze sharply, Jimmy's jaw clenched involuntarily. Placing the letter gently on the desk between them, Keanu concluded softly, some letters wait for the right person to be ready, even if they don't know they're the one. Attempting to ward off encroaching vulnerability, Jimmy shook his head lightly, dismissing the notion. That's not about me, he protested weakly. Rather than pushing back, Keanu held his gaze steadily, allowing space for denial to dissolve naturally. After a protracted silence, Jimmy finally broke it, speaking almost inaudibly. My mom, she was sick for a long time. Nodding empathetically, Keanu encouraged him to continue. Voice trembling, Jimmy confessed, everyone kept telling me, you're so strong. Like making jokes through it all made me noble or something. But I was just scared. I didn't know what else to do. The audience sat in stunned silence, many clasping hands tightly, others visibly tearing up. This was no longer a television show, it was something far more profound. Probing gently, Keanu inquired, did you ever tell her? Jaw tightening reflexively, Jimmy admitted painfully, I tried. But by the time I found the right words, she couldn't hear them anymore. Allowing another poignant pause to stretch taut, Keanu leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Sometimes, the letters are written for people who don't know they're ready to read them. Closing his eyes briefly, Jimmy absorbed the impact of those words. The camera zoomed in gradually, capturing the slight tremble in his shoulders as deep, uneven breaths filled the void. He didn't cry outright, but his silence did, a testament to grief long buried yet freshly unearthed. Between them lay the letter, still open, unfinished, unmistakably real. Sitting silently, shoulders slightly hunched, Jimmy's eyes glistened but remained dry. Something within urged him to flee, yet something deeper compelled him to stay. Keanu reclined slightly in his chair, offering patient support, recognizing the gravity of confronting a grief that had waited too long to be acknowledged. Eventually, breaking the spellbinding silence, Jimmy ventured cautiously, you ever lose someone? His question was deceptively simple, but the underlying tone betrayed complexity. Drawing a steadying breath, Keanu confessed, yes. Anticipating follow-up, Jimmy probed further, did it break you? Rather than answering immediately, Keanu leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. The crucifix swung slightly with the motion, catching the light once more. I didn't break, he admitted honestly. I hollowed. Furrowing his brow, Jimmy sought clarification. What does that mean? Meeting his gaze squarely, Keanu expounded poignantly, I kept going, doing interviews, shooting movies, smiling, but inside, I was just gone. Like someone had scooped out the part of me that used to believe in meaning. The room remained utterly still, no coughs, no restless movements. Continuing reflectively, Keanu shared, for a long time, I thought faith had abandoned me. I prayed, and nothing came back. I waited, and there was only silence. And that silence felt like punishment. Nodding slowly, absorbing the depth of Keanu's admission, Jimmy prompted gently, so what changed? Reaching into his pocket, Keanu retrieved a small, aged envelope. Sealed shut, the yellowed paper bore faint creases indicative of careful preservation. Holding it gently in one hand, he explained, Elijah gave this to me the night before he left. He said, you'll know when to open it, when you're sitting with someone who needs it more than you do. Leaning forward slightly, intrigued, Jimmy queried, "What's in it?" Smiling softly, Keanu admitted candidly, "I don't know. I've never opened it." Raising an eyebrow skeptically, Jimmy marveled, "You've carried it all this time?" Affirming with a nod, Keanu elaborated philosophically, "Some things don't get lighter. We just learn how to walk with them." The envelope trembled faintly in his fingers as he gazed at the seal contemplatively. Recalling Elijah's parting wisdom, Keanu recounted, "He told me it wasn't for me, not really. I was just the one meant to deliver it." Fixating on the crucifix resting over his heart, he assessed Jimmy openly, noting newfound vulnerability. "I think," he mused slowly, "that life doesn't always bring us people to answer our questions. Sometimes, it brings people to sit with us in them." Visibly moved, Jimmy swallowed hard, his voice lowering reverentially. "You know what's strange? I've done over 1,000 interviews, politicians, actors, scientists, astronauts, and no one ever made me feel like this." Offering a gentle smile, Keanu suggested insightfully, "Maybe it's because no one ever asked you to stop performing." Blinking rapidly, processing the magnitude of Keanu's observation, Jimmy hesitated before voicing another query, almost inaudibly. "Do you think all of this, everything we've talked about tonight, do you think it's about me?" Pausing purposefully, Keanu glanced down at the crucifix momentarily. Lifting his eyes again, they shone unwaveringly. "I think," he declared resolutely, "it always was." Holding the envelope between his fingers reverently, Keanu regarded it as though it were sacred. The paper, soft with time, bore yellowed edges and an intact seal, a symbol of trust and perfect timing. Jimmy watched it warily, as if it might detonate at any moment. A quiet tension pulsed palpably throughout the room. The audience, no longer mere spectators but active witnesses to something private, raw, and unrehearsed, felt it keenly. Looking at Jimmy one final time, Keanu posed a pivotal question. "Do you want me to read it?" Hesitating briefly, Jimmy's hand brushed his knee nervously. Swallowing audibly, he whispered, "Yeah." Nodding once, slowly, Keanu broke the seal decisively. The sound, faint yet definitive, reverberated through the silent studio. Unfolding the paper carefully, he began reading aloud, his voice low and steady. "To the one who hides behind light. You were just a kid when she got sick, and no one told you how to grieve. When the person who raised you began to fade, you became the distraction. You learned how to make others laugh while your own chest was breaking in silence. They said you were strong, but they didn't see you in the hallway, rehearsing smiles before walking back into that room. You blamed yourself, didn't you? Not for the sickness, but for the silence, for not telling her what you were too scared to say. That you loved her more than your own breath. That you didn't know how to live without her. That you were sorry you made her laugh when you should have just sat and held her hand." Jimmy looked away sharply, jaw tensing visibly. The corners of his mouth strained to maintain composure, but his eyes surrendered completely. Keanu continued relentlessly. "You thought being funny would protect you. You thought applause would fill the hollow space. But every time they laugh, you wonder if she would have laughed too. And that is the weight you've never spoken out loud." A strangled gasp escaped Jimmy's lips as tears spilled freely down his cheeks. He didn't attempt to stop them. Deliberately, methodically, he removed his microphone, snapping the clip from his shirt. Setting it gently on the table, he stood up and walked off stage without fanfare. No music played, no lights shifted, just silence. Keanu waited patiently, neither following nor speaking. He simply sat there, gazing down at the letter in his hand. The crucifix on his chest glinted steadily, unwavering amidst swirling emotions. The camera maintained a wide shot, capturing everything, the empty stage, the solitary figure seated pensively, and a studio full of people who had momentarily forgotten they came to be entertained. Minutes passed excruciatingly slowly. Finally, Jimmy returned, walking deliberately, head bowed slightly like someone stepping back into a room after a prolonged absence. His eyes were red-rimmed, shoulders slouched in a manner markedly different from his usual posture. Sitting down heavily, he remained silent initially. Keanu refrained from looking at him, granting ample space for whatever needed to emerge organically. How did he know?" Jimmy stammered eventually, voice cracking under the weight of revelation. Lifting his gaze compassionately, Keanu beheld Jimmy's newly exposed vulnerability, the mask stripped away, leaving behind just a son who never got to say goodbye properly. "How did Elijah know that about me?" he implored desperately. Picking up the notebook gently, Keanu ran his hand across the worn cover thoughtfully. He saw people, he explained simply. Not their roles, not their reputations, just their weight. The kind they think they're hiding. Shaking his head disbelievingly, Jimmy countered, but he couldn't have known. I never told anyone that stuff, not even my wife. Allowing a beat of silence to stretch taut, Keanu offered sagely, some pain speaks without words. Some people, they hear it anyway. Blinking rapidly, fresh tears spilling unchecked, Jimmy nodded faintly, accepting this truth. Unlike previous bouts of crying, however, these tears carried no shame, only release. Recalling earlier assertions, Jimmy queried incredulously, you said you never read the envelope before tonight. Then how are you so sure it was for me? Meeting his eyes squarely, Keanu confessed, because I saw the way you laughed when you didn't want to. I saw the way your jokes got louder when things got quiet. I've done the same. Pausing significantly, he added softly, and because sometimes, God sends messengers to places no one thinks to look, like a janitor in a film studio or a late-night host tired of pretending he's okay. Exhaling shakily, Jimmy glanced at the letter again, cradling it tenderly in both hands. I've carried this for so long, he admitted hoarsely. Nodding sympathetically, Keanu affirmed, and now you don't have to. Another lengthy silence settled between them, distinct from previous iterations, not heavy, not haunted, but rather, an exhale. A letting go. Reaching forward decisively, Jimmy picked up the letter, holding it securely. Voice raw but steady, he confessed, you know something? For the first time, I don't want to be funny right now. Smiling gently, Keanu encouraged, you don't have to be. Resting in Jimmy's hands, the letter no longer resembled a script or prop but something sacred, a fragment of himself he hadn't realized survived. The audience remained utterly still, collectively holding their breath lest they shatter the fragile moment. Looking directly into the camera then back to Keanu, Jimmy reflected aloud, I've never talked about her on this show, not really. I always said I didn't want to bring the mood down. Understanding completely, Keanu nodded approvingly. But I think, he suggested thoughtfully, maybe it's okay if the mood changes. Chuckling softly through his nose, not as performance but as genuine relief, Jimmy smiled wistfully, fingers folding the letter's edges gently. I think I've spent my whole life trying to make sure the room was okay. Leaning in slightly, Keanu countered pointedly, maybe tonight, the room was trying to make sure you were. Closing his eyes momentarily, Jimmy reopened them clearer, softer. The camera captured it vividly, something lifting from his face, not erased or forgotten but released. Fixating on Keanu one last time, he inquired earnestly, how did he write that letter for me, to someone he hadn't even met yet? Rather than answering immediately, Keanu touched the crucifix gently, letting it fall against his chest. Maybe he didn't, he speculated softly. Maybe God just waited for the right moment to put the letter in the right hands. Exhaling deeply, not broken now but beginning anew, Jimmy processed this revelation silently. Meanwhile, the audience, conditioned to clap, laugh, react predictably, remained utterly motionless. They didn't need to. Something monumental had transpired, something applause couldn't touch. Gazing down at the letter one final time, Jimmy looked up at Keanu hopefully. Can I keep it? Placing the notebook between them symbolically, Keanu affirmed, it was always yours. The show never officially ended that night. There was no customary thank you for watching segment, no closing jokes, no credits rolling to upbeat music. Instead, the cameras lingered just long enough to capture Jimmy and Keanu sitting in companionable silence, a single letter bridging the gap between them, surrounded by a studio full of people who had temporarily forgotten their original purpose, to be entertained. In the days that followed, the internet struggled to categorize what had occurred. It wasn't merely an interview, it transcended therapy or performance entirely. It was something indefinable yet profoundly impactful. People rewound the clip repeatedly, sharing it widely with captions like, "This broke me in the best way possible." Comment sections overflowed with strangers bearing souls online, confessing grief, regret, gratitude, forgiveness, things they'd never dared articulate aloud previously. Unexpectedly, a new segment debuted on Jimmy's show the following week. Dimmer lighting replaced the usual brightness, sans band or laughter track. Simply Jimmy, seated across from ordinary individuals burdened by extraordinary weight. Titled Listen Before You Laugh, each episode featured authentic conversations with people navigating complex emotions. A woman who lost her son 5 years prior and hadn't spoken about it since. A veteran using humor to mask PTSD nightmares. A man who hadn't cried since his father died in 1994. Jimmy asked real questions, listened intently, and closed each segment not with a joke but with silence, inviting viewers to listen alongside him. Though Keanu never returned to the show, a package arrived at the studio a month later. Inside lay a small wooden box wrapped in linen, containing a silver crucifix and a card beneath it. No signature accompanied the message, "You don't have to carry this, but now you know what it meant." Final closure came weeks later during a quiet conclusion to one of the Listen Before You Laugh segments. Wearing a black shirt, sans suit or microphone clipped visibly, Jimmy sported the crucifix just barely visible beneath his collar. Smiling gently, not for ratings but from somewhere quieter, into the camera, he stated simply before fading to black, "Tonight, the audience doesn't need to laugh. They need to listen."